Hi friends, it's Terry Gaines. In this video, I'm sharing 4 different Christmas card designs created using designer series paper. All the product I'm using for my cards is from Stampin' Up. You can use your favorite designer series paper, coordinating cardstock, and coordinating embellishments to duplicate these cards. I will be providing a cutting guide to cut your designer series paper and cardstock, along with all the details so you know how many sheets of designer series paper and cardstock you need to purchase to make these cards. Sometimes when I design a card, it's the designer series paper that is my inspiration, and sometimes it's an embellishment that's the inspiration. For these cards, it's a little bit of both. The first card I'm going to share with you, I wanted to use the candy canes that are on one of the designs for the Sweetest Christmas 12 by 12 designer series paper. You get 6 different double-sided designs in that packet. They coordinate with garden green and real red, 2 of the colors that I'm using. And with the candy canes, you can fussy cut these out, or you can purchase the coordinating dies and you can cut these out with dies. You're going to get 32 candy canes per sheet. There's 2 sheets in the packet, so altogether you can get 64 candy canes. So I've cut those out for one of the card embellishments, and I adhered 2 of them together with my Stampin' Seal. So you just use your favorite adhesive to adhere those together. I chose to attach them onto the card with dimensionals, so I put some dimensionals on the back. And initially I was going to use the coordinating garden green ribbon to create a bow to attach that. But with the thickness of the bow and the dimensionals, I thought that might be extra postage, and I did not want to have extra postage. So the bow is actually a die from the cottage wreath dies. I used this die, used real red cardstock, and I cut out a bow for this card. I did attach it with a mini glue dot, and so that's going to be an embellishment for one of the cards. When I'm all done showing you all 4 cards, I'm going to show you the other 3 embellishments with that same card layout. But before I show the layout, I want to go through all the details on the embellishments. So when I used those 4 pieces for one of the cards, I had these 2 pieces of designer series paper left, and I decided to embellish this with the Scottie Dog. The Scottie Dog is created from a punch, so I cut out the dog with basic black cardstock, and you can have the dog facing either direction. I used this paper for the bow. So how I did that was I cut the paper into 1-inch strips, and then I bring the paper into the punch, let's see, in this direction, and this will maximize your designer series paper. Punch that out, it trims off the excess so you can keep punching and maximize your paper. So as I mentioned, that was with the punch, and then I also used a mini glue dot to attach the bow to the dog, and then I'm attaching the dog to the cardstock, and I'll talk about the dimension for the cardstock when I get to the card layout, but I attached that with the dimensionals. And then this is the designer series paper I layered onto the card base. So we're going to go on to all the embellishments before we talk about the layout of the cards. So the next card I'm going to share with you, I knew I wanted to use the Boughs of Holly designer series paper. I absolutely love this paper. I think it's both the design and the richness of the colors. The Cherry Cobbler Real Red and Evening Evergreen and several other greens. It's just really beautiful paper. So I wanted to embellish it with a poinsettia. So initially I was going to use these 3 pieces of designer series paper. But when I decided to cut this, I don't have that much. I have a lot of open space. I'm going to save this paper for another card. And I thought this would be a good choice to go with a poinsettia. So these are the 3 designs I'm going to use for this embellishment, and I'm going to save these for another project. So what I did was I cut out the poinsettias with a die set that's called the Merriest Frames Hybrid Embossing Folder and Dies. So you get an embossing folder that will emboss this image. It coordinates with a stamp set, but I'm using these 2 dies and these 2 leaves, and cut them out on just colored cardstock. So Cherry Cobbler and Evening Evergreen. It makes it so much quicker than stamping and coloring, so you can make some Christmas cards in a fairly quick fashion. I did use dimensionals and mini glue dots to attach those, and I'm just real quickly going to show you how I did this. There's no wrong way to do this, and any way that works best for you will work. I'm going to curve these down with a bone folder and then just turn the tips of them upward. I usually do this for all of my flowers also when I attach them. And then I'm going to put a dimensional right in the middle. I'm going to put this on a basic white circle that I've cut out with the layering circle dies. I'm going to do the same thing for the smaller layer of the poinsettia, curve it down and then curve it up a little bit. And I'm going to attach this one with a mini glue dot. We don't want to get too much thickness on a card, especially at the holidays when you have lots to send out. So if we don't have to pay extra postage, then that would be the goal, in my opinion. So there we have that. For the leaves, you can add some texture to those if you want. I'm going to curve them down and curve the tips up. I'll put a dimensional on the back of the end. I want to tuck underneath. So by putting one dimensional behind the poinsettia, that allows you to reach the greenery in there and get it underneath and attach that. So I would do the same for this one. I embellish these with the champagne rhinestones. You get larger, medium, and a lot of small ones. So I use the small ones, and I put 3 of them in a cluster to be part of the embellishments for the poinsettia. We do have other embellishments that would work, but I think these champagne rhinestones work perfect and just add a little bit of bling to your card. So that's how I did this one. I didn't actually attach that, so we'll bring this one in. So that's how I embellished that. I shared with you the 3 designs we're going to use for the papers. So the last card I'm going to share is actually the snowflake. That was my inspiration for the card. I wanted to use these wonderful snowflakes. You get 24 in a package. We had these in last year's mini catalog and they're a return favorite. They come in a sheet like this. You get 24 in a package, as I mentioned. And what you need to do is separate them. So I just find if I go in here and just carefully pinch the snowflake from that paper, it'll pop out. One side of the snowflake's got an iridescent paper, the other side is white. So the paper I'm going to, designer series paper I'm going to use for this project is from the, this is called the Santa Express paper. So I liked the shaded spruce paper with the snowflakes, and I like these papers right here for my card. So I chose to use these 3 designs. So that meant I'm going to have one paper coordinating with the Poppy Parade and 2 with the shaded spruce. I attach the snowflake with a mini glue dot. This design will allow you to put a dimensional in the back of it, but I chose a mini glue dot to keep it closer to the cardstock to just kind of protect the snowflake a little bit. And then what I did was I used the opal rounds for my embellishment to decorate, just add a little embellishment to the front. So those are the embellishments I have for my card. I've shared the designer series paper I'm using for the cards. So now let me share the actual cards and their layout. So the first card I'm going to share with you is using this element. I'm going to just move this stuff out of the way. And now what I have is the layout for the cutting guide. So for this designer series paper, this is the 3 colors I chose. I shared with you that I was going to use, and you can decide which side of the paper you want to use for your project. And these strips are 1 inch wide. So if they're 1 inch wide, we make our first cut at 5.5, second cut at 5.5. Then these 2 panels, we can cut the number 3 at 1. We can get 24 per 12 by 12 sheet. And if you use all the designs, if it was 12 sheets in the packet, you could get 288 per packet. So I decided to layer this onto garden green and to real red. So what we have here is the garden green would be layered 1, which is 5.5 by 1 1/4. you'd get 10 per 8.5 by 11 sheet. For the real red, it's 1.5 thick in height. You'd get 10 per. That would allow you to know how many pieces of cardstock you need and how many sheets of designer series paper. And these are the finished cards. This is how the card would look with those candy canes and the designer series paper. Now, as you can see, I did not put any sentiments on the outside of my cards, but what you could do is add a sentiment. So the two dies and the stamp or the punch that I used have coordinating stamp sets that you are bundled together for 10% savings. So the Merry Christmas is from the Christmas Scottie stamp set that coordinates with the punch. The Joy is from the Merriest Moments, which coordinates with the dies from the Poinsettia, for the Poinsettia. And the Christmas Cheer is from the Sweet Candy Canes, which is the stamp set that coordinates with the dies that cut out the candy canes. So you can stamp your sentiment on a strip of paper. I like taking the double oval punch. So I like to stamp first and then line up the punch to punch out the sentiment, and then you can attach that to your card. You can attach it anywhere that you'd prefer or leave it blank on the outside with no sentiment. So that's a personal choice. But here are the first cards, and as I mentioned, I'll have this in a PDF you can download from my blog. So here are 3 cards made with a candy cane. So the next card I talked about was the little Scottie Dog. So this designer series paper I have cut to be 2 inches by 4. And if your cutting guide for number 1 was 4 inches, for number 2 was 4 inches, and all the number 3s were 2 inches, you'd get 18 per sheet or 216 per pack, which is 12 sheets. And that would be adhered to the card like this. I have this layered on to colored cardstock. I'm using real red. It's 2 3/4 by 2 3/4, means you'd get 12 per 8.5 by 11. This is 2.5 by 2.5. You're going to get 12 per sheet. So that will help you determine how many sheets of cardstock and designer series paper you need if you want to use this layout. And as I mentioned, you can have the Scottie Dog go in either direction. And here is I just made all of my cards with that designer series paper. Just love that Scottie Dog. So we're going to put these cards here. So the next card I'm going to share is the card layout I use for the poinsettias. For this card, I've changed the orientation. I failed to mention this. I guess it's the same orientation here. Just let me back up a little bit. I failed to mention that I have a direction of design. So this kind of shows why I chose to have where I had my first cut. So on these cards, the first cut is this way because the direction is this way for the card. And I have the first cut this way because the direction of the direction of the designer series paper. In the case for this designer series paper, it really does not have a direction. You can rotate it either direction, but if it did, you would want to keep that in mind when you cut your paper. So for this card layout, what I am going to do is have my orientation in this direction. For all 3 of the designs, I have evening evergreen in the back, and I chose to have the designer series paper 2 inches wide and 5.5 inches long. So you're going to get 12 per sheet by cutting 5.5 here, 5.5 here, and all these 3s are at 2. For the colored cardstock, it's 2 1/4 by 5.5. You can get 6 per 8.5 by 11 sheet. So hopefully this is all making sense to help you determine how many sheets of cardstock you need and how many pieces of designer series paper. So these are how all of these cards turned out. And as I mentioned, you have the choice of adding on a sentiment, and you can place that any location that you feel that you would like to place that. So that is all optional. The last card is the layout for the card with the snowflake. Now this card, I chose to have the designer series paper 1.5 inches wide. So again, 5.5, 5.5, and then all of these are at 1.5. Get 16 per sheet or 192 per packet. The coordinating cardstock is just one color behind it, whether you use the Poppy Parade or the Shaded Spruce or another coordinating color. It is 5.5 by 1 1/4. You get 8 per sheet. Now the coordinating cardstock that the snowflake goes on is 3 by 3. You can get 6 per sheet, and you get 24 snowflakes in a package. So that's going to help you determine how many sheets of cardstock and packets of snowflakes you'd want to get. And this is how these cards turned out. So I actually just love how these Christmas cards came together with the different elements. Now, one thing I did mention to you that I was going to share additional cards where you would use these layouts, but the different elements and different designer series paper. So for the candy cane layout, this is how it would look by using the product that I used for the Scottie Dog. It's the same paper here and that layout. Here is with the Boughs of Holly designer series paper and the poinsettia, and here's the layout with the snowflake. So what's really nice about this, you choose your designer series paper and your element to create the layout you would want. For the Scottie Dog layout, we have this one, and here's bringing that same layout but the candy cane product in. This is the poinsettia, and here's with the snowflake. So you can really mix and match these. For the poinsettia card we have here, this is how it would look with the candy cane and the candy cane paper, the Scottie Dog, and the snowflake. And then the last one for the snowflake, this is using the candy cane and that paper, the Scottie Dog, and the poinsettia. So you are not going to go wrong with whatever layout you choose, whichever elements and designer series paper. As I mentioned, I have a cutting guide you can download from my blog. It will give you the cutting guide, pictures, the supply list that I use for the product, so you can download this. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I would love to have you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click the red box under the video, then select the red bell to be notified when I upload a new video. If you don't have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and would like to purchase some of the Stampin' Up! Product that I used or any other Stampin' Up! Product, on the bottom of the comment section of my YouTube video and my blog, I have a link to the product, or I have an image, the product that will link you right to my Stampin' Up! Store. Please reach out to me if you have questions. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this project. Take care and happy creating.